Hello, welcome to Math for All, where we strive to make math creative, curious, and inclusive. I'm Molly Vokey.
And I'm Heidi Subnani. And we are doing things a little bit different tonight. Normally, you come here for math content and to hear from other math educators or people working in the field, maybe in school improvement or in like building math communities. And today we're going to be speaking about suicide prevention. And so we do have some math for you here. Suicide is the third leading cause of death in the United States for 15 to 24-year-olds. 5,000 youth a year commit suicide. So that works out to be about 10 out of every 100,000 young adults. Every day, there are 12 youth suicides, which works out to be about every 2 hours and 11 minutes. Someone under the age of 25 commits suicide. Suicide rates have quadrupled in the last 60 years, particularly among males 15 to 24 years old. And 5 years ago, my family lost our nephew, Ethan Zegarra. And so today, we're going to be speaking with my sister-in-law, Debbie, who is an educator and the co-founder of Ethan's Purpose. And we will be speaking about suicide prevention. And so we do want to give you a moment. If this topic is not something that you are able to listen to or hear about right now, feel free to take care of yourself and not watch this episode. But for those of you who are here, welcome. And we hope that you will gain some understanding and resources about caring for the young adults in our lives.
Yes, thank you. Those are some somber numbers. So please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and our YouTube channel, which is Math for All. We would love for you to see what we're doing and keep up with our show. So as Heidi said, we are going to be talking with Debbie Zegarra about how we can support mental health and suicide prevention in our communities. And let's just bring Debbie in. She's going to tell her own story. So we're not going to do a bio on her today because her story is going to be quite a story. So I'm going to let her tell it. Let's bring her in.
Hi, everyone. Molly and Heidi, thank you so much for inviting me on your show today. Telling Ethan's story, I always love to talk about my kids, as most mothers do. But telling Ethan's story is a little bit different because of, I like to say his story is not over, but the pause that it caused in our family. And it actually, 5 years ago tomorrow is the day that he passed. So the timing of this is kind of perfect, if you will. But Ethan was, we adopted Ethan at birth. So we got him and his brother, Richard. Richard is 2 years older. We got them both at birth and had a really, really happy childhood. He was one of those kids, and Heidi can attest to this, that he just never stopped. Like he was always on the go. And he was into everything, but he was happy, laughing, having a good time. And he was one of those kids that kind of flew under the radar when it came to school. Not that school came easy to him, but he got by. Richard struggled a lot and required a lot of tutoring, special education. Ethan did not, and he did well about till middle school. And that's when a lot of things changed for him and for our family. At the time, we also had adopted a daughter out of foster care when she was 8 years old. And Ethan was 7 at the time, and she required a lot of attention from our family as well. So we had a lot of focus on Richard. We had a lot of focus on Christina. And again, Ethan was just kind of the good kid. He did what he was asked. He passed his classes and kind of flew under the radar when it came to behaviors. But we ended up separating our family from Christina. She went back into state care and was being taken care of. And Richard was going through some challenging times. And but then we started seeing some behavior changes from Ethan. And he was taking some risks, doing some things that were unusual for him, getting in trouble at school, sneaking out at night. He started self-medicating, started drinking, started smoking. And that was very alarming for us because that was not a behavior that we had ever seen out of Richard or Ethan. So we did reach out for help. We started going to a therapist, and it was more of a behavior therapist. What can we do to help support him and encourage him, and be more constructive in our discipline, rather than we didn't look at mental illness at all. Not at all. Didn't even cross our radar. And even though the kids were adopted, they were very, very healthy. But the further our journey went into the troubles and the challenges, the more we started looking into the mental health aspect of it, and not having a health history, it was very difficult. Mm-hmm. We had actually just started to explore the possibility of bipolar when Ethan took his life. But he, like I said, he was involved in a lot of risky behaviors, and he had a lot of trust issues as well. And he always would say to me, "Mom, what's my purpose in life?" In fact, Heidi, you probably remember, he and Robert talked quite a bit about, God and why would God put me here. And they talked quite a bit. And I think Robert gave him a journal, and that just touched my heart. And I remember he would ask me, "Mom, what's my purpose?" And I'm like, "Dude, you're 16. Your purpose is to go to school and hang out with your friends." But he just had this heavy, heavy burden that he had to know, why did God put me here? And I think a lot of that drew back to, I was adopted. My birth mom didn't want me. So if she didn't want me, then why am I here? So again, a lot of therapy, started seeing psychiatrists. We did use some medication. He was working out with a trainer. But unfortunately, he was able to get his hands on a gun. And my husband and my son, my other son, they do hunt, but that was all locked up. But even at the time, we were locking up our medicine. Even the Tylenol was locked up. And when he wanted to shave in the shower, he had to ask, and we would hand him the razor. He would shave and hand it right back. I mean, we felt like we had all precautions in place. The knives were locked up. The keys were locked up. And it's just a horrible existence to have to be that way. But we felt like it was probably a temporary thing. But he got his hands on a gun. He stole it from an unlocked car in a neighborhood. And that particular night that he attempted, he was impulsive. And I think that he just felt like he was in a situation he could not overcome. And he shot himself. And I found him the next morning, and, was air cared to the hospital. And, the first miracle was that they suspected happened about 1 a.m, and that he lived long enough for me to find him at 6 a.m. Second miracle was that they actually moved him and was able to get him safely to the hospital, where they immediately did 2 surgeries on his brain and his skull, and they were able to stabilize him, where he did then live for 15 days in the neuro ICU. And he did eventually, his body gave out, and he was not going to survive. And so we were fortunate enough that we worked with Life Center, and we were able to donate his organs and tissue and bone. And then he passed on September 29th. But, in the process of those 15 days, which a lot of it, my brain, I still don't remember a lot of it, but there are some parts. Heidi, one of the best, I don't think I've ever shared this with you. One of the best gifts that was ever given to me was that journal you brought me at the hospital. And I had every intention of journaling every day, and then it just got overwhelming. And of course, I did fill that journal, and eventually I think about maybe writing a book. But I would not have thought of that on my own. And now I can go back and read some of those thoughts, because, like I said, my brain has blocked out a lot of those memories. But in that journal, I have found some of the greatest blessings that our family has ever experienced. And just recently, I think it was a day or two ago, on Facebook, I reposted, in fact, right here, I will share. This is his prayer map. It's kind of hard to see with the reflection. But we have a lot of family and friends in other states, and people would text us and say, we're praying for you, we're praying for you, and so we started coloring in a map of the United States, and next thing you know, there were countries, and by the time Ethan passed, we had somebody in all 50 states and 17 countries praying for him, which was incredible because you feel like you're all alone, and I'm by myself going through this horrible tragedy, but you're not. And so that was there's just so many blessings, but that was one of them. But then after that happened, for whatever reason, I asked the Life Center people, because they shared with us the statistics of organs they're able to recover, and it's not anywhere near what you would think, or at least what I thought. So Ethan died the end of September, and he was only number 55 donor for the year. And they said that it's believe it or not, there are not a lot of organs viable enough to use for transplant. And I don't know what made me ask that number, but then since then, the number 5 or 55 has come up so many times. And so after he passed and we had his funeral and everything, the community gave us a huge Ziploc gallon bag of cash. And I looked at Rich and my husband, and I said, what do we do with this? And he's like, we pay bills. And I'm like, no, we don't. We don't pay bills with that. And he's like, well, what are we going to do? And I said, we have to do something for other people, because, Ethan had every advantage really that there was. We live a comfortable lifestyle. He went to a good school. He had teachers and counselors that cared for him. We had an outside therapist. We had psychiatrists. He worked with a trainer at the gym. Think of all those kids who don't come from a loving home, who don't have parents that care, who don't have access to mental health care. We have to do something with this. So we went to the bank and like an 8-year-old, I'm like, here's my money, I want to open an account. And he laughed and he said, well, how much is in there? And I said, I have no idea. It was $550. And I'm like, there's your 55, So then we took $5,500 from his college fund, added to that, and then it just kind of took off. And I remember sitting in the courtyard at the hospital, and I thought, what are we going to call this organization? And somebody said, well, Ethan's purpose. This is his purpose. And I'm like, I guess it is. And so from there, our organization grew. And so now I guess we've been around for almost 5 years. And I have our statistics here. I'm trying to think. We have raised, with just our race, we've raised over $50,000 doing a 5K race every year. We're currently offering small group counseling in 6 schools, but by the end of this school year, we'll be in 10 schools. We're working with 3 counselors, and we're adding 2 more in January. We provide SEL materials to schools, and we started doing suicide prevention trainings for school staff members, so they could recognize the signs. And that's something that my heart is really into, because when I became a trainer and I sat through that training, and they're going through signs that you could recognize that your child might be in a crisis or in distress. And I'm like, check. And, and as a mother, I think, how did I miss that? How did I not see this? And that's something I think that I'll forever have to work through, is that, I did the best that I could at the time, but why didn't I educate myself more? And I'll tell you why, because I didn't think I needed to. Mm-hmm. So I literally start every training with, if I had had this training 5 years ago, I would not be standing here right now. It's that effective. And so we do that for the community and the school staff. And then just a couple months ago, developed a 1-hour program that we're doing for teens and youth. And it's a little bit of our story, a little bit of suicide prevention, how to recognize changes in your friends, things that you need to be concerned about, and changes in yourself. And then what is mental health care? Because everybody's talking about it, especially since COVID, but kids don't really, and a lot of adults don't really understand what is mental health care. And so we go through, what does that look like? How do I take care of myself? And it's been so incredibly cool to see these kids. they just want to learn. They just want to learn. So when we talk about setting boundaries, if your friends are all going to the football game Friday and you're tired or you don't feel well, it's okay to say, I think I just want to stay home and watch TV tonight. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, or talking about surrounding yourself with people that make you a better person, and things like that. And they're like, well, they might get mad. Well, then are they really your friend? Oh my gosh, it's been incredible. So we have already done that presentation for over 4,000 students in the past 2 months. It is crazy. And afterwards, a lot of them will come up and give me hugs, and they'll ask me, can I pray for you? And I had one little girl last week. She's in the 6th grade, and she said, can I give you a hug? And I said, oh, that would help my heart feel better. And she said, I already prayed to God that Ethan can be at rest in peace now because you're doing work in his name. And I'm thinking, she's in the 6th grade. Like it inspires me to do more because I feel like, people are listening and they are hearing, and hopefully, we are making a difference. So.
No. And I'm not just saying this because you're my sister-in-law. So like people need to understand too, like some of this is because someone asked me like, how you and Rich have like done this. And I said, well, part of this is, I said, the kind of people that they've always been. I think thinking back to all of us being in the hospital, I think we're all, so if anyone needed something, you would call Debbie. Like if a friend needs something, you call Debbie, and Debbie shows up at your house with food and takes like, and is the taker carer of the things. Like, so you need someone to take care of something. Like if you need someone to make logical, clear decisions, you call Rich. And if you need someone to like take care of you, you call Debbie. Like she's got you. And so in those moments, I remember and a little bit of the same in our household as well. And I remember thinking like we're used to being the doers of the things. And now you also have to be the receiver of the things that people are trying to reach out and do. And that's do for and support and you all had an amazing community for that, but that's because of the type of people that you are. And so the not surprising at all to me that this has become the part of your life now, because even then I remember us having a conversation about, well, when he is better, we're going to go and speak and this will be the thing. And then he's going to share his story and it'll be a way for others to learn and to grow and to think about it. And that's still happening. You're still doing that work and still sharing that story, and still the impact continues because of the people that you are and the kid that you raised and who he was as a person too. And so not surprising to me that this is where you are now, but it doesn't make it, this is very difficult work.
Yeah.
And
it's very emotionally draining. In fact, like the one day we went to the Newport Independent Schools and we did the whole middle school and high school student population in 3 different sessions. And then we did the staff after school. And that evening I had tickets to go see the MJ musical at the Aronoff downtown Cincinnati with my girlfriends. And I walked out of there and I got in the car and I just sat there probably for 10 minutes and just cried. And it wasn't anything in particular. It was just, when you just need to release your stress. And my friend that does these trainings with me, and she said, you're going home and going to bed. And I'm like, I am. And I crawled into bed that night and slept until the next morning. And that's the hard part in it, is that, we're getting asked to do so many of these trainings, and it's hard to say no because I want to keep, educating the community. But then at the same time, I have to, respect the boundaries of I need to take care of myself. And I do that by journaling, and I do that by taking walks and doing things help myself, go to the gym and things like that. And I can't very well go out and preach that if I don't do it myself. So, yeah.
I mean, you've talked a little bit about what you are doing as an organization to support mental health and suicide prevention. What are some things that you could advise our listeners to do in their own communities?
I think the piece that is missing the most, if I could say this, is just the awareness about what mental health is and reducing the stigma. And I'll be honest, when I was young and we used to say, oh, they're crazy, or and that's just not a good term to use. As kids, we say things that we regret, but even as adults, I think I've met several people who have attempted suicide and survived it, and they've written books and they now tour and they speak. And I've met several of them, and every single one of them said, first of all, they didn't want to die. They just were at a breaking point and did not have the coping strategies to deal with the stress in the moment. But all of them also expressed that they felt shunned, and they felt, there's a guy named Kevin Hines, jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. He wrote a book called Cracked, Not Broken. I've got it somewhere here. And you can go online and Google him. He has tons of YouTube videos where he speaks about his story. But in every single one, it seems like he says he was on the bus, he was sobbing, headed to the Golden Gate Bridge, and not one person said, are you okay? What can I do? And he said he walked the Golden Gate Bridge for 40 minutes. And he said, if one person just says, are you okay? Is there something I could do for you? He said, I won't jump. And nobody did. And he jumped. And I think that as a society, it's natural to kind of shy away from people that are acting abnormal in public. You want to be careful, you want to be safe and everything like that. But if we could just start talking about this, at our churches, at our schools, at our mothers groups, at the ball games, there's no shame in saying, I go see a therapist. There's no shame in saying, I need to take medicine to help regulate the chemicals in my brain so that I can make reasonable decisions and not escalate to anger so quick with my kids. I call them happy pills, but Rich calls it better living through chemistry, but I think the more that we can, and it's not that you need to go publicize, your challenges or your issues, but the more that we can normalize the fact that learning behavior modifications, or learning, when my body, this is one example we give when we talk to the kids. I was driving here today and my heart was beating fast, and I looked at my watch and my heart rate was up, and she's talking a lot and she's sweating, and we're thinking, what's going on here? What's going on here? Well, wait a minute, let's stop. We're going to a school with 1,700 kids we've never met. We're going to present a very sensitive topic. Maybe we're nervous. Maybe we have a little of anxiety going on. So what can we do? And then you employ your strategies. And my therapist, Ellen, always says it's the work you do when you're in a good place that will save you when you're in a bad place. So learn strategies for yourself. Help your kids learn strategies. And then when they hit those crisis moments, it'll carry them through those crisis moments so that you can get to a mental health professional. Here's a simple one. I teach special ed. So I have kids all the time that have anxiety. And I'll be honest, Ethan said he was anxious, he had test anxiety, and I dismissed it thinking, just get over it, dude. School was easy for me. It wasn't easy for him. And I did not validate those feelings. When I gave a presentation a couple weeks ago, one little boy came up and he says, I know how you feel. My dog just died. And it was as sweet as could be, as innocent as could be. And a teacher apologized to him. I said, don't apologize. To him, that's his reality. Mm-hmm. We have to validate that as a sixth grader, his dog dying is a huge deal. So when it gets blown off, then what are we doing? We're dismissing his feelings. And then he thinks, oh, there's shame in that, and we shouldn't be doing that. But something as simple as whatever's stressing you out, put it on a Post-it note and then rip it up and throw it away. You know, there's so many little strategies that you can do, and there's tons of stuff on Pinterest, on YouTube. But teach yourself some strategies, teach your kids some strategies, and then talk about it to try and get rid of the stigma of, you know, we're not all okay. We're really not, you know.
I feel like since the pandemic, it's been slightly more okay to not be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I enjoyed the pandemic.
That is one positive to come out of it, though.
Yeah.
Right. I do feel like it's become more mainstream to discuss your feelings or to talk about self-care. And those things are smaller and seemingly less sensitive than talking about suicide or that I have a mental health issue or anything like that. But there are steps to get there, I would think. And I mean, so many horrible injustices during COVID that allowed us opportunities to grow as humans and to have compassion. I would hope that there is just more openness to, at least I feel that was what my journey was.
Mm-hmm.
The learning journey through COVID was really compassion.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, again, as educators, it's, you know, we had a lot of stress on us because we're all teaching virtually and you can't be hands-on and you can't give the individual attention that you did when you're in person. But then what I'm seeing, at least, in not just at the young elementary age, but even the high school kids where I am now. So for 2.5, 3 years, these kids had no social skill interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden they're back in the school building and our expectations are still up here as far as how to interact, how to have a conversation, how to respond respectfully to an adult and a peer. And it's become obvious, and I would think a lot of your audience would say the same. It's become obvious. No, they're missing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, give grace. And I know it sounds silly, but my seniors, you know, I'm teaching them how to just basic politeness. When I hand you a paper, say thank you. Oh, really? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, never in a million years would I have not thanked a teacher for handing me something. But these kids, they have a gap.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we need to remember that they've lost a lot of the like you said, the self-care, the social interaction. There's so much anxiety because now they're thrown back into a group of people and they're expected to act like they did before the pandemic. You know, self-care is a big one. I think, you know, as women, we don't do that enough. As educators, we don't do that enough. You know, I think that, you know, there's something to me, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but there's something really fun about coming home from work on a rainy day like today and throwing on your pajamas and just watching the Food Network, you know? Yeah. And why do we feel guilty for that? I know I do. Why?
Because there's so many things to do, Debbie, and your list is so long. And if you don't get it done,
it'll be there tomorrow.
What will happen?
You know, I'll tell you, that's one thing. And I've said this to many people, that September 14th, I had to walk away from my life. And guess what? It kept on going. My kids were taught at school. My grass got cut. The dogs got fed. The house didn't get cleaned as often. But you know what? Life went on. And it really didn't stop. So it did show me, Heidi, like you were saying, I was always the doer. And it was really hard for me to accept help. But when you don't have a choice and it's kind of forced upon you, it really does make you reevaluate. You know, not that I thought I was invaluable or irreplaceable, but it kind of humbles you in a way that you think, you know what, I can step away from this for a little bit, and that group is going to go on, and I can get myself together and come back a stronger, happier person. And it's okay to do that, you know?
So it's taken me 50 years to get to that point, and I feel like I have still a lifetime of learning on how to do that. And when you're talking about self-care, I feel like it's an interesting thing because during the pandemic, not to keep going back to that, but I feel like it just was so much talk about it during then. There's all these recommendations on what you should do for self-care, but you're the only one who knows what you need.
Oh yeah.
I don't think that you always need the same thing. Like, I'm just discovering this about myself. Like you just said, like, sometimes I'm just going to sit there and I'm going to watch those stupid 6-minute videos on Facebook for like 2 hours. And you know what? I'm not going to make one single recipe that I saw in those 2 hours. I'm just not. So, yeah. And sometimes I'm going to watch a movie and sometimes I'm going to go out for a walk. Like, I feel like it's just really, really about being in tune with yourself way more than the things that I should do, the things that I have to do, the things I'm expected to do. Mm-hmm. And if people started to learn that as kids who are naturally good at that because they don't want to do responsibilities, like, we really should learn from how annoying they are, I do feel like if we honored that for them versus being like, oh, clean your room and whatever, like, I'm never going to stop doing that. But nonetheless, I do think that kids would grow up to have less, I need to do this because of this person, and I should be doing this because it's on my list, or I'm expected to do this. It's really hard to kind of back off and do the things that you need to do for yourself.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Well, and how to intentionally set that up too. I think we can, for so many of us, it's like, how do we be intentional about self-care? Or am I, because I know I will do this, am I just like not trying to think about or deal with something by going to, and how do you balance that? And I think that's so hard. That's hard for adults to do, let alone for kids to do, right? Yeah. So it's that idea, and how we talk about that, how we are open about that, I think is such, it's just one of those things, because none of us grew up with social media.
No.
And so, like, when you think about the things that we have access to and all of those different pressures that come in different places, like, it's okay to not do that sometimes too. It's okay to like find another outlet or to evaluate how that affects you. And they don't always know that either, because we're learning that as adults, and it's hard to do that as adults. And so then, giving kids tools to do that versus just, well, let's get off social media.
But even Heidi, like, I think a lot about what Debbie is saying is like, just talking about it. Like, you don't even have to have all the solutions, because we don't.
No.
We have no idea what social media, like, how many people can we track to say like, oh, social media did this to so-and-so? Like, it's
you can't.
hard. You can't. So, just the fact that you might talk about it with your kids and say, what do you think social media is doing to you? Or how do you see social media impacting you? Or, and that goes for everything, right? Like, not just social media, but like, how do we care better for ourselves? And social media is like such a good way to start that discussion, because
well, and I was very surprised this takes us back to last spring, because Ethan was not able to finish high school. He was a junior when this happened. Graduation is a trigger for me. My oldest son didn't he graduated, but he finished online because it was a challenge and he just needed to finish. So by the grace of God and our principal's foot in his rear end, he finished online, but he didn't want to walk, didn't want a graduation ceremony. So, I, as the mom, felt robbed of that. Then Ethan didn't graduate. So that's a trigger for me. So last May, graduation's coming up, and I'm thinking, well, now I teach at the high school. Some of my students that I've worked with since 4th and 5th grade are graduating. I really need to go celebrate them. I don't know that I can. So I set up some appointments with my therapist, and I was leaving school one day a little bit early. And some of the students were like, where are you going? And I was gonna lie and say, oh, I have an appointment. And I thought, no.
Which is not a lie, actually.
Well, no. but I wasn't going to be.
You weren't going to tell the whole truth.
No.
Right. I wasn't going to be completely transparent. And I stopped, and I don't know what made me say it. And I said, I'm going to see my therapist. And they're like, are you okay? And I said, no, I'm not. And I said, and I told him I have this coming up. I think I want to go, but I want to try and put some strategies in place to help prepare myself for what might upset me. And they're like, oh, wow. So the next day, walked in that class, and like, what'd she say? What'd she say? Like, they wanted to know what Ellen said. And I literally spent 45 minutes talking to them about different strategies she had given me and things to do. Well, turns out I ended up not going to the graduation ceremony, and I went to one graduation party for about half an hour, and that was it. And that's what I allowed myself to do. And I was successful. But then I saw some of those kids over the summer, and they said, right in the middle of Kroger, they're like, did you go? And I'm like, no. I said, I ended up not going. And they're like, oh, so it didn't work. And I said,
oh,
but it did work.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I needed to do this
for myself.
Yeah. And I did this, and they said, oh, wow. So for them, seeing a real life example of an adult dealing with, something that is going to be stressful, could be a trigger. And I came and I said, but I was successful because I didn't put myself in a situation that would have compromised my mental health and made me, one, probably become a spectacle running off the stage crying, so in those moments, it was such a teachable moment. And again, my initial thought was, don't share it. And they don't need to know all the details, but share enough that they can learn from this experience,
But how impactful that is. And that decision came to you at the spur of the moment, like almost like divine intervention.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many of those stories. It just, sometimes I'll walk away from a situation like that, and I'm like, where did that come from? Where did that wisdom come from? But I feel like, in those moments, and then I do have a lot of people that will reach out after they hear us talk, or, even months or years later, and they'll say, my daughter, this is the most, again, in Kroger. What the heck? I'm in Kroger in the produce section, and a gentleman came up to me. This was about 3 years ago. And he said, you're Ethan's mom, right? And I said, yeah. I said, did you know Ethan? He says, no. He said, my daughter did. And she heard your story, and she had a plan, and she had a letter, and she brought it to me and said she needed help. And she's now getting help, and she's doing really well. So there we are in the tomatoes, crying our eyes out, hugging each other, but that, again, it's like, okay, that tells me we need to keep talking. And the fact that he came back and shared that was so powerful. And I tell him, I said, I don't think you guys realize how much it means to me, because one, Ethan's death wasn't in vain. We are learning, and we are growing as a community. And then two, it allows me to just keep on going, keep doing it. So, yeah.
That is amazing. Amazing. Well, why don't you tell people where they can learn more about the work that you do? I know that you told us that your website was under
revamp. It's still up and it's running, and it's a lot of the initial information we put up when we started the organization. And because I do work full time, and then this has become a full-time job, we finally hired somebody that's going to start working on it, start adding more content, a lot more of what we're doing. And we are also implementing, we're implementing some scholarships too. I think I failed to tell you that for people that are going into the mental health field, because there's such a shortage of mental health care providers, whether it's counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists. So we are implementing with just the school I teach at this year. We're going to start it with that, and hopefully grow that. But we're also implementing a funding request, because a lot of schools, there's no money for social emotional learning programs. And there are a lot of materials out there. You just, nobody has money, and we know teachers use a lot of their own money for everything else. So we're going to, hopefully by the end of this calendar year, we're going to have a request form online. You can go online and request, this is what we need. This is how many kids it will affect. This is how I'm going to implement it. And then, our board will evaluate that and hopefully award some grants for those types of materials. But our website, we do have a Facebook page and a Twitter and it used to be Twitter. Now it's X. I don't know. Is it just called X?
I don't get it.
I am not a social media person. I'm 57. I'm too old for that stuff. But we have some young people that are doing that. It's funny. One of the young girls that volunteers a lot, she's a junior in college and she is all over that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's great because I'm not. So I'm trying to get up with all that stuff. But again, it's so much time and stuff. But our website's the primary place that you can learn more about it. And we just had our big fundraiser for the year. It's a 5K that we have in September every year. And we had over, gosh, I don't know how many, 30 corporate sponsors. Everything from they donated bottles of water to paying for our t-shirts at $3,000, and we raised over $12,000 at that race, which will pay for a lot of counseling, a lot of programs. So I'm excited. But yeah, that's our website. You can go there and learn more about our story and see some great pictures of Ethan. He was a character. I tell you, he was a funny little thing. I miss his sense of humor more than anything. Mm-hmm. I really do. Yeah. What would you say, Heidi? What would you, if you had to describe Ethan, what do you miss the most? What would you say?
So part of it is like the lab, and he was like, this is going to sound odd, but he was like so gangly, like during, like in his, like from about 5, until like 13, 14, he was just like, but he like went all in on all things. And I just like, there were arms and legs and Spider-Man, and he had like very like fluffy hair when he was little. Like it was like so light and just would like fly up like little feathers and gap teeth. And he would point at you. And like Heidi was not like something that he could pronounce when I entered the scene after, he was like 2. And so that, that was just, it was like,
and he did have a speech problem initially when he was younger. Yeah.
Yeah. And just the love of LeBron James and how we would argue about whether I thought Michael Jordan was the best and he thought that LeBron James was the best. And then, just all of those things. I was looking at pictures of all of the kids from
the Boston
trip, and then the pictures from Dad's funeral.
Yeah,
when they were all, that was like 2014. So they were all young and they were all photobombing each other.
Yeah.
Like it's like Ethan would photobomb on from one direction one time, and then Richard would just like walk past, and like that was the photobombing. And then you have my 2 like in the back, that kind of situation. And it was just like laughing at the older cousins, and but they were all, just nonstop energy all the time. And but very thoughtful. I think people think, oh, well, kids who have all these. No, he was always like super thoughtful and caring for his cousins and wanting everyone to be included. And
he had he was very, like he a deep thinker. Like we would have a conversation and he would go away and come back a day or 2 later with more questions.
Yeah.
It was fascinating how his mind worked. But there are things that, so LeBron was his thing. And so when he passed and the funeral home called and they said, we need a suit. And I'm like, for what? And they said, well, to bury him in. And I said, number 1, he's 16, doesn't have a suit.
Right.
Number 2, we put him in a suit, nobody's going to recognize him.
Yeah.
I said, I'll send some clothes over. And I looked at Rich and we both said at the same time, LeBron James jersey. And that's what we buried him in. And people, I don't know, people were probably offended, but his friends thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And I laugh. I thought, you know what, there's so many aspects of it, but I feel like, that's Ethan. That was Ethan. So he was funny. I do miss him.
And Cheetos.
Cheetos, all the Cheetos, and the hot sauce challenges.
Yes.
Yeah. Golly, what a character. But I've got so many stories, and I'm in this mom's group. I love it. We've all lost children one way or another, either drugs or suicide, some in the military, and we meet once a month, and it's called Sacred Stories. I love this. And you can take and put your spin on it however you want, but we get a writing prompt every month. And generally I wait till the night before to write it. And then I put pictures to it, and we go and we read our stories. And the idea is to keep these sacred stories alive. And I've been putting them in an album. And like Richard's girlfriend never met Ethan, but she can now read these stories and get to know Ethan through the stories. And one day maybe I'll publish a book. I don't know, but
well, you have time to do that now, I think.
Yeah, my spare time.
Yeah.
Now we go watch the Food Network. Isn't it Halloween Cookie Challenge or something?
Yes.
Ooh, perfect. Yeah. Only a couple days left till it's October. Well, Debbie, we so appreciate you taking the time to do this. Not only taking the time, but the mental capacity that it takes to talk about this is enormous. And so we appreciate you coming in and doing this for us.
Well, thank you. I could talk about him all day long, but I just, in his spirit, I just want to keep educating people so that, one person every 11 minutes dies by suicide. So we've been on, unfortunately, 4 people have died by suicide since we started this conversation. And we need to bring awareness to it. We need to change that. So whatever we can do. So I appreciate it very much. I'm just glad you didn't ask me any math questions.
Yes. Next time.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason I only taught math up to 5th grade. So
it's all good.
Right. That's all right. Well, thanks so much for being here and sharing your story.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
All right. Well, that was amazing. I tried my hardest not to cry that whole time.
I know. I saw you. And, I think we have, for anyone listening, we need to keep the conversation going. And I think that, the work that is done in community. So there are always things that we can do within a community to make a difference in the sphere of influence that we have. And I think this is one of those areas to consider. And I'm just fortunate enough that I get to be inspired by family members who do this work as well. So,
yes. And so our next show, we will be back to talking about math, hopefully less emotional stuff. And we're going to be back on October 19th with Jeff Crowell, and we're super excited about that conversation. So we hope that you will join us. And until then,
we hope that you keep math curious, creative, and inclusive for everyone. Good night, everyone.
Good night.